On here.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're on.
Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2017 show. I am your host, Don Kay. We are live from McGilvery Speedway, 30th and High School in the beautiful town of Speedway, Indiana. And if you're coming in town to see the Brickyard 400, do yourself a favor. Make sure you come to McGilvery's. It's only about 10-minute ride straight west of the Speedway. They got great food, great service, and all the adult beverages, as Linda will attest to, are ice cold. A couple of things I want to mention before we start. Those of you who I'm sure remember the Miss Hurst Golden Shifter, Linda Vaughn, is scheduled for heart surgery on Friday again. She's been scheduled several times and had to postpone it, but she's scheduled now for Friday. Hope everything works out for her. Also, how many people watch the Iowa Corn 300? How many people like the pole winner? Same people that like the winner before. How many like the winner of the race? There's rumor floating around since Mr. Fry and Mr. Miles were here that something very smart is likely to happen in the season next year, scheduling. That Long Beach and Phoenix could be back-to-back, which makes sense. They're out west anyway. And there is a good chance that I think 2019 that Iowa will go back to Saturday, where it drew very good crowds, and still talk about adding another race next year to the schedule, make it to 18. And my first two scheduled guests for next week are the Harding Racing owner, Mike Harding, and the team general manager, Larry Curry. They're scheduled to be here next Tuesday night. And I want to welcome back the author of the year, will be a best-selling book. Brett Robinson is back after a month and a half to write a book. He has promised to bring 300 of them here to give away an autograph. If you believe that, I got a bridge too. And I want to thank him because he's the guy who came out and started this whole thing with the TV, and we certainly appreciate it, and the viewership has really taken off. I want to remind you, tonight's show, the Autosportradio.com 2017 show, is presented by Honda HPD, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and the Verizon IndyCar Series. I also want to remind you that between now and the 30th of October, you need to get to the Indiana State Museum, see the A.J. Foyt exhibit. It is fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you need to go. It is fabulous. But you got until the end of October. Don't mess up, do like I usually do and forget something. So get out there, take a look at it. My first guest, who is I've known for many years, he started out in racing as a mechanic. Somehow miraculously worked his way up to team manager, to general manager, team president, and along the way collected 3 Indy 500 championship winning rings. He is now in semi-retirement, I guess. But he's in town, and I grabbed him, and he said he'd be here. Please welcome Mr. Tom Anderson.
Thank you.
What brings you to town? You're generally flitting about the south.
Well, we still have our house here on the west side, and so we're in Indy 6 months out of the year, and my wife's family is all from the area, so kind of home.
Yeah, well, I tried to contact your bride, who is sitting at the bar, by the way. Cheryl Anderson is sitting there in the colorful blouse. And I was on her email or Facebook thing, and I didn't hear, so I sent her a message. And she said, I'll check. I'll check with Tom. And went back and I said, I think he'll check with you first to get clearance. But you're here. You know, you spent many, many years in this world of motorsports and IndyCar in particular, but with Adrian Fernandez, you were in sports car racing as well, successful in everything you did. What do you think about the racing of the IndyCar series now?
Well, I think that I think it's past the low. You know, I think we're on a rebound. A lot of that has to do with the economy, and so you know, when you have recessions. You know, there's a few people I can look around in here and see. You can remember the fuel crisis from 1972, and that took nearly 8 years for racing to come back then. And it's no different when the recession hit in '07 or '08, depending on where your contracts were and what all was going on. If you add 8 years to that, you're at 2015. We're at 2017. So I think we're on schedule. I think the Speedway, the IndyCar Series, is strong. The racing is fantastic. We can sit here all night and argue about the rules and things like that. But overall, the races have been good this year.
One thing that I have picked up, at least I think, in my view, is that there doesn't seem to be as many penalties. I mean, when you're racing, you can have a problem. You can get in somebody's way. You can tell when it's obvious. But as Paul Tracy pointed out in one of the things they didn't call, he said, this is racing. If things happen and you got to kind of, if you're trying to pass somebody and you bump them on the way and move, and when you watch your in-car cameras, the cars move a bit. Let them race.
True. There is respect among the drivers. Usually when you get the young, aggressive drivers that are new in, and I'll mention Mr. Newgarden. When he first stepped up, Dario made the comment one night, and this has been quite a few years ago. With respect, he said that the kid was so far over his head he was going to give him a snorkel. But in reality, Dario recognized the talent of young Newgarden coming up, and he's proved it. He's won races. He's going to win a lot more. Great kid for the series.
Do you like the Mazda Road to Indy program? You think that's a good stepping stone to train the drivers to, when they get to IndyCar, they're prepared?
Well, Don, one of the things that I think we've probably missed in the past is that there's too many small formulas. If you look at the small formulas and classes of racing that you can do for less than $1 million, there's too many. We have Formula 4, we have F2000, we have the Mazda series, the Indy Lights, yes, I like it, but it's hard to differentiate when you get a shifter cart going. That's a pretty darn quick little piece as well. So because technology has become less expensive, kids in shifter carts now can have technology that we didn't have in the 90s in the IndyCar. So, I'd probably like to see a few less formulas for these kids, because it does give kids more of an opportunity. More kids get in the program, so that's good. But at the end of the day, I think the good ones filter to the top pretty quick, and we definitely need a ladder system. Yeah.
The thing that's the bad side, in my opinion, is the fact that there's some great talent in the wings, and there's no seats. And they're talking to Elio about, we hear you're 42 years old. Well, Foyt, for Pete's sake, he drove into his 50s. Dick Simon drove well into his 50s. There's nothing to say because he's 42, he's got to go, put him in a mausoleum somewhere and put him away. And there's not enough seats today, although my guest for next week, scheduled guest, is planning to run a full season next year, so that's going to bring another car. Juncos Racing, more likely than not, will have another one, so that brings another car into the series. Hopefully nobody has to bow out like they did this year, so it can kind of build. But it just seems to me they've got some great talent in the wings just waiting for a seat.
But Don, we've always had the kid that was really good and didn't have any money.
Yeah.
That's always been racing. And we've all known somebody that fit that category. It's good to hear that we've bought a possible couple of more cars. The thing that would really make the IndyCar series stronger if they were running 26 cars again all the time. But there again, that's economics, and the fact that we are on the upswing. Adding a couple more next year would be fantastic, along with another race is good. And anything that they can do to
All right, we're back. The breaker tripped. So we're back on. As you were saying, if you can remember where you were.
Oh, where was I? Oh, the logistics. Logistics are a huge cost for the IndyCar teams. I remember back in the kart days, one time we went to the West Coast 5 times. And, you take a 40,000-mile schedule and turn it into a 60,000-mile schedule. It makes a lot of difference. So anything they can do to help in that certainly is a benefit for everyone.
Do you pay a lot of attention to the IndyCar series now?
Oh yeah. My name's actually on a list over at the Speedway as an arbitrator for should there be a protest that calls up. I'm one of the names on the list that can end up in between the league and the team before it goes further.
I don't think I told you this, but when Mr. Bernard left and there was a search for a replacement, Chubby sent them your name. I recommended that they talk to you. I said, I don't know if he'd want the job, but this is the guy I'd recommend for it. Obviously, you didn't get any calls, so they don't listen to me.
Yeah, and I mean, Chip Ganassi said that same thing to me, and I said, I don't know whether to thank you or cuss you. So, but I've never been one to want to be part of the league. That is a very, very, very difficult job. I was on the CART Rules and Technical Committee for 10 years, and seeing and being close to that organization, I know firsthand what those people go through, and believe me, I'm not tough enough for that job.
Something that always impressed me about you is no matter what position you were in as a team manager, president of the team, whatever, you were always calm. Nothing that I ever saw got you riled. There's an answer to a question. Well, I said that I saw it. Doesn't mean you didn't go in a transporter, shut the door, and I didn't hear anybody screaming. But there was always an answer to the question, or was people around that you had around that could look for the answer to the problem and try and solve the problem. I never saw you get all riled up. Now, maybe you did, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't want to talk to everybody that I ever worked with, but we tried to keep the composure, and it certainly got out of check a few times, and it's interesting because if you do it in a way to where you have respect for the other person, they'll tolerate a lot more than if you're condescending. So, I worked for Chip for 11 years, and we probably had 24, in-your-face shouting matches. And he'd usually win. And I'd be mad 5 minutes later, and he'd come walking up, and he goes, "What are you mad about?" He was past that. He was on to something else. But we had that kind of relationship. He could yell at me, I could yell at him, and it was just like that was part of the job. So, there's people you can do that with. I'll give you a good example of a driver, Alex Zanardi. Zanardi basically would create an argument just to see how strongly you felt about whatever it was you were discussing with him. And if you didn't argue, then he knew you didn't have any passion for what you were trying to get across, and therefore you didn't believe in it yourself, so why should he? So, there's characters after characters.
Now, you're going through all this, and you're saying I wouldn't want to run the series as too much, but yet being the team manager or the president of Ray Hall Linneman Racing, you're doing the same thing because except you're kind of in the middle with the team and against the series, so you're still discussing with it. So what's the difference if you were on the series side?
No, I think from the series, from the team side, you're going at it from one angle. Now, there's many different things in a team. Okay, so I always tried to be kind of the cement that held the bricks together. But that's really only one deck of cards. When you're at the league, you're basically have got the promoters over here, you've got sponsors over here, and you've got all those team owners over here. That is the jobs that I had times 100. I take all the heat that they've taken, all of the leagues have taken for that. Thank God they're there to do it, because without the leagues, we don't have any racing.
It's interesting, and I don't know how many people realize it, but you have 3 rings from the 500 teams, and there's not many guys that can say that. Foy can say he's got 4, but he drove the car, but you were with 3 different teams and won 3 different 500s from the management of a team, and that's quite an accomplishment. I think it says a lot.
I was feeling pretty proud about it one time until I talked to John Boslog over at Penske's, and I think he had 13. So I thought, well, I'm nothing. But it was different eras, different times. It was a lot of fun. The first one with Johnny Rutherford in 1980. Things were different there. There was, we had 2 cars for Johnny, and we had 6 mechanics. That was it. When you got the car done, you got in the truck and drove it, because there wasn't truck drivers. When we came to Indy that year in 1980, we basically loaded the car at midnight in Midland, Texas. We were already late. We left, Bernie and I got in the truck, and we started driving at 2 in the morning. And we had to switch between Midland and Abilene. I think we switched 3 times because we couldn't stay awake. And finally, Bernie drove for 2 hours, and I got 2 hours of sleep, and then I could drive for 6, and once he got 6, boom, we were there. So and then 1989 with Patrick, that was kind of the start of the big organization. I was a chief mechanic, but I didn't actually touch the car. So that was a crazy deal. And you talk about being surrounded by great people. Emerson Fittipaldi driving. Patrick had put together a fantastic deal. We had a car that Pat somehow negotiated out of Roger. And we had Jim McGee as a team manager, and a crew of guys that were just, some of them are over at the league now, running the league. So there was a lot of guys involved in that program that were really, really good people. And then the same with Chip in 2000 with Montoya. I mean, what an incredible talent that kid was when he first showed up. I mean, incredible.
Well, the cars have changed dramatically, obviously, and the safety factor now is really big. I mean, some of the, what happened to Scott, if that had happened even 7, 8 years ago, he wouldn't have walked away. He limped away a little bit, but the cars are phenomenally well built these days. And I've been told with the new car, in addition to some of the changes they've made physically in the car, it's even safer now. It should be, and faster. So I trust you'll be around on the 25th to go watch it run.
Oh, absolutely. But I think we've got to go back to something that Chris Economaki said. He didn't like the word safe because he felt it distracted from the excitement of motorsports. He said the worst thing we ever did was create the safer barrier. Okay? We should have created an impact-resistant wall, but we shouldn't have called it the safer barrier. And the cars are dangerous, plain and simple. We're trying every day to make them less dangerous. So that was always something Chris thought took a little bit of the zing out of motor racing is, if you put speed limits in the pit, and who has speed limits in racing? But there's things that you have to do to where you don't make it insane. And, all of the technical innovations that have been done to make these cars less dangerous, okay, I think is fantastic. I mean, you look at that, what Hinchcliffe and Bourdais went through. 10 years ago, we'd have lost both those guys. So, absolutely incredible to the work of Delara, a lot of the engineers over the years that have done things. I mean, I hope one of the things that they eventually find a way to incorporate is a halo or the reflective shield, something that will add some additional protection.
Well, there's no question, and those of you who watched the Iowa race, they showed a picture of Sebastian Bourdais that he's coming along faster than anybody anticipated. He may be back before Sonoma. Yeah. And, of course, Dale says if he's back, we got a car. He must have put one of the 2 or 3 that he crashed, put them back together to get another one. That'd be good to see him come back, and the wreck he had was amazing that he is doing as well as he is. In fact, he was spotting for somebody this weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, did you go to Iowa?
I didn't. No. I went to the Speedway.
I saw you there.
Sat in the grandstands and loved the that last 30-lap shootout. Loved it.
That's, like everyone has said, the racing in IndyCar is probably better than anywhere in the world. In any series, I don't care. And again, to win the championship for the series, you've got to run on a 3/4 mile track. You've got to run on a 2.5 mile track, street and road courses. You got to run on everything. And if you win it, I think you're probably the best driver in the world.
And very well. No argument out of me, Don, on that. These guys are extremely talented, extremely fit. I mean, you just look at the steering wheel action on some of those cars at Iowa, and some of those guys were fighting those things pretty hard. You got to be in pretty good shape to handle something like that for 300 laps. So, I don't think they get the respect they're due. But I think the more things that IndyCar can do to bring the fan into the race, like the numbers on the side of the cars that give you the pit stop time and all those kind of things to where the fan can interact is going to help build the popularity.
Do you think, and this has crossed my mind a number of times, I've mentioned it on occasion, that part of the problem with young people getting interested in racing is you can't work on a car anymore. You can no longer buy a car and go and tune it and change the plugs. First off, some of these cars you can't find the plugs to begin with. You can't set the spark. You can't do anything except pull a computer chip out and put another one in. So I don't think a lot of schools even have auto shop anymore.
Well, that's probably true, and I know the last time that I was looking to hire people from the tech schools here in town, you had to pick, the students going in, they had to pick their automotive brand. If they wanted to be a Toyota or a GM or something, you went down that line. You didn't go, because it's all electronics. So in reality, to me, and looking, and anything that the league can do, and we talked about it a little earlier, is bringing the fan into the deal. Somehow or another, you got to connect what's going on the racetrack through your phone to the person in the stand. And, I think as we're getting to be, there's a lot of tech companies coming to town, and there's a lot of gamers that, are writing software for this stuff, and there's got to be a way to connect those race teams through that phone to that guy, so that person has a connection, whether it be because they can win something or do something, or somehow, some way. I mean, there was an interesting deal the other day that I read, and it said that your hometown football team is now your second favorite team, because your first team is your fantasy football league team. Okay, so if that's what's going on in the world, then to me, IndyCar's biggest job is to connect the fan through the phone to the racetrack. And once we can do that, that's going to bring the fans back. When the fans come back, the sponsors come back. When sponsors come back, the race teams come back. I mean, could you imagine if IndyCar got to race for what professional golfers make each weekend? Can you imagine how many cars would be at the racetrack? I mean, now I can sit here being out of the sport and back away from the tree and look at the forest. Now, how do you do that? If I knew how to do that, I'd be a really wealthy man.
Well, they're getting close to that, but the only thing I hope would be, and this is something that I get barked at about every so often, but you go into a place and you see people looking at their phone. I don't want to go to a grandstand at a race and see everybody, instead of watching, sitting like this.
Well, I mean, if they're at the racetrack, I don't care what they're looking at, because they had to buy a ticket to get in, and there'll be times, just in the last 2 years at the Speedway, because really the last 2 years is the only time I've ever sat in a grandstand. But so the year before, the Verizon phone, basically, it'd only work about 30% of the time. So I thought to myself, this is no good. You got Verizon, who's a series sponsor. I'm going to the biggest race of the deal. The damn phone doesn't work. Okay, now, but I didn't mention that to anybody. I just had that feeling as I walked away. Okay, but then if you notice, somebody else must have complained about that too, because there was a lot of new construction going on at the Speedway this year in order to make those cell phones work better. And this year, I would say my phone worked 90% of the time. So once they increase that speed, if somebody is watching the race if they're looking at timing and scoring on their phone, and are not looking at the racetrack, but look up when there is a accident or something. I mean, as long as they're there, that's all that matters.
And I have a feeling it won't be long, because Buddy McAtee told me, this was 7, 8, 9 years ago, prior to his death, that it wouldn't be long before technology will run the whole thing. That's all we'll have. And he wasn't far from wrong.
No, he's right. And I mean, when computers start driving the car, that's probably when I'm done.
Yeah.
When you take that human factor out there, and I mean, right now, the computer's a fantastic thing, all this simulation, and I'm sure this simulation has gotten a lot better than in the last few years since I've not been there. But at the end of the day, the computer can still only tell you where you've been. Okay? The race car driver is the one that tells you where you can go. And so a lot of race engineers out there need to keep that in mind, because I'm sure a few of them have forgot it. But the race car driver is still in charge until the computer starts putting on the brakes and turning the wheel.
Well, when I mentioned when the first the DW12 came out, that the computer said it would run like crazy, and they put it on the racetrack, it didn't run worth a hoot. This time they told me to use wind tunnels. He said because the computer doesn't drive the car. So
computer doesn't drive the car.
You put it in a wind tunnel, you get a better reading, and they're confident that when they put it on at the track here that it will go.
Right. And the other thing that's magical that doesn't get talked about a lot still is the fact of how much these racetracks change. Every year, we all remember when the Formula One cars came here and only the Bridgestone cars were running. Well, that morning, one of the fellows that used to work for Ganassi, who was working for McLaren's at the time, called me up and said, "Was I coming to the race?" And I said, "Yeah, Steve, I'm coming." And he said, "It might not be a race." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, Michelin's probably not going to let us run." And I said, why did they have such a problem with the new surface? And there was a long pause on the phone, and Steve said, "What new surface?" I said, "The racetrack's been paved since you were here last time." "We didn't know that." And really? So, I mean, racetracks change every year. There's thousands of laps get run on these things. That's why you can have the perfect setup at Iowa last year and not this year. The big ovals settle, so bumps that used to be a rise are now a dip. And as fine razor blade edge as the current IndyCar is, you take a driver as great as Scott Dixon, and yet he's struggling because he didn't get a chance to test there because something changed in that racetrack or in the tire between this year and last. So the technology that's there, the black art still in racing today is still the tire. Because Bridgestone, Firestone, they won't tell you not very much. Guarded secrets.
Or less. But a lot of the drivers said the tires were fine. That wasn't there was a concern going in, but it turned out that wasn't as big a deal as they anticipated. Some guys lost, the tires went away a little bit, but if you knew how to run it and if there's anybody that's good at saving tires and saving fuel, it's Dixon. Boy, he knows how to do that.
Yeah, but also it's the setup, and it's also how much grip does the racetrack have, especially in these racetracks that go through these hard winters.
Or one like this weekend when they had 3 or 4 different series, they had 3 or 4 different brands of tires, and
makes a big difference.
And you'd think rubber is rubber, big. No, it's
not
either. Not even close.
No.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm very pleased that you accepted the time to come out here. I've always enjoyed watching you and talking with you, and to be sitting at home. I don't care if some guy who stayed with the same team has 13 rings. You were with 3 different teams that have 3. I think that's as good as it gets, and I want to thank you for your time, and thank Cheryl for letting you come out here.
Thank you, Don. It's always a pleasure. I think this is actually my 3rd time here, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Tom Anderson. Well, my next guest is on his way up here. I'm going to mention that tonight's show is also presented by Sam Pierce Chevrolet in Daleville, Indiana. You got to come to the country to see why the best prices are, in fact, in the country at Sam Pierce Chevrolet. And you also see why Tom is at the top of customer satisfaction. He doesn't sell you a car and stand behind you. He stands alongside you. Just take I-69 north to exit 34, go east 1 mile, and you won't miss him. Sam Pierce Chevrolet. And if you want to find out what race drivers like about driving Indy cars, you got to try the Indy Racing Experience. Go to the IndyRacingExperience.com, find a date at a track that you can go to, and make a reservation. You make the call. It's 317-243-7171. And then if you sign up online in a promo box, put SJ1. You get a 50% discount at the Speedway. So check it out. Find out why these people love to drive Indy cars. And if you need anything embroidered of any kind, no matter what it is, no matter how you get it there, Stitches 2 can handle it. Give Fran a call at 317-271-3444, and she'll tell you what you can do and when you can get it done. If you are a vintage car buff, I highly recommend the 2 magazines that SVRA has out, the Vintage Racing Quarterly and Trans Am Today. They're both fabulous magazines, so log on, svra.com, sign up. You won't be sorry. Do you have computer problems like I do quite frequently? Actually, very frequently. I was in there again last week. Got a problem? Get it solved. Go to Computer Overdrive. They're at Lyndhurst and Crawfordsville Road on the northeast corner. And talk to Jack. He can help you. I guarantee it. His number is 317-328-0766. Computer Overdrive, give him a call. And up next for the SVRA is the July 27th to the 30th, the Portland International Raceway, the Portland Vintage Racing Festival. If you're anywhere in the area, do yourself a favor. Make sure you go there. You will love it. My next guest is a gentleman that I'm very pleased to have here. This is his 2nd visit. He is well, they say you never are a retired Marine. You're always a Marine. He spent 24 years in the service. He graduated from Purdue University and spent a lot of time his last years in the Marines in the intelligence division. And they took his intelligence. He came to work for IndyCar in 2015 as the chief of staff. And I got to think somebody looked and said, wait a minute, we got a position for this guy. So he went across the street to Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where he has become the director of events at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. At various times during the season, he has as many as 2,000 people working for him. That's probably more than you had working for you in the military.
Pretty close.
I'm pleased to have him back. Please welcome Kirk Dooley.
Hey, thanks, Don. Very good to be back. Appreciate that.
Which was more fun, the being chief of staff or what you're doing at the Speedway?
That's a hard one. I mean, it was just very different, but I love the heck out of what I'm doing now. It was I think a brilliant opportunity to start at IndyCar because of the education that I got there in just a short time working with pros like, Vince Kramer, Brian Barnhart, all those folks over there. I think really shaped my understanding of what this world is because I came here as an outsider. A lifelong motorsports enthusiast, but until you're behind the curtain, you really don't know what really goes on and the challenges. And the guest before us, he really captured it in terms of the sanctioning body, what you're required to do in that. You're trying to balance so many factors, and the complexity of that I found is a fascinating thing with IndyCar. So certainly grateful to have that. But in terms of moving over to the Speedway, well, there's just a tremendous tie-in to what I was doing before. As far as leading folks, when we talk about the safety patrol, we talk about event staffing, that is absolutely a large regiment that you're trying to command and control across 988 acres as far as the vastness of all of our lots and, camping, parking, everything.
And you have, the variety of events, concerts, obviously races, And the Christmas thing had to be huge. I think everybody was quite surprised at the reaction that the Speedway got to that. And it's my understanding it's going to grow.
Well, we hope so. Now, that being said, I mean, our throughput of a given evening, I mean, we were at max capacity for the Christmas lights. They were backed up all the way to Lafayette Road some nights on the weekends, and that was just a matter of physics, trying to push those folks through the route that we had. But when you've got 4 million lights to look at, people took every bit of time that they could. But again, a great success with the Speedway. I thought it was a great way to utilize the facility, during the winter months. I think it was, again, pretty special.
I reminded Mr. Miles when he was here last week that the first time I had him on the program, I said, that's a big facility. Have you ever considered using it for something else? And he said, no, this is a race facility. I said, well, obviously that thought didn't last long. How much time is involved from your side if they have a concert outside of what's going on a race weekend? If they have another event going on other than racing, is that a big deal? Do you have
Well,
people
as far
in place to take care of that?
I mean, for concerts in particular.
Yeah.
Well, they're its own event. I mean, clearly. Now, Kyle Krisloff, he's one of our directors that deals with a lot of those details. So he drives those factors, but it's a big evolution to bolt into given events. So, as you know, we've got the 400 Fest, which is our concerts this next Friday and Saturday night. During the Brickyard weekend, starting at 7 to 11 o'clock. Well, when you think about all the activities that go on during the Brickyard and the race, leading up to that, I mean, that makes for a long day. And you've got two different shifts. You've got cars that are trying to exit as the Brickyard activities are ending, followed by the ingress for the concert crowd, two very different crowds in this regard, but trying to handle the flow and the mechanics of that certainly, takes a fair amount of planning.
The thing that impressed me, now, I've been around, it's hard for you to believe that I'm old enough that I used to visit the original Snake Pit when it was revitalized or reborn in a completely different area, number one, and in a completely different event. It started off, they were happy. I think they had 8 or 10 or 12,000 people. This year they had over 40,000. What does that do for you? Now you got to keep an eye on that, and you got to have people to take care of that in addition to the race crowd.
Well, it was close to that. Certainly, it was sold out capacity. So
yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah,
they had
absolutely.
people behind the sound control. There were people behind. They couldn't see anything. But
Well,
they were there.
I'll be honest. I got near there. I wasn't going inside. And that's coming back from Afghanistan. I mean, that was a little too much. Between that and Lot 1C, I think I met my match.
So now, what all do you oversee? Parking, the whole 9 yards. I mean, you control all of that and oversee all of that.
When you think of event staffing, all of the personnel that make the month of May to make the 500 happen, that by and large falls underneath me. Now, when we think that, I think you've got the historic yellow shirts, the safety patrol.
Yes.
And certainly an iconic organization that I'm proud to help lead. Proud to try to make sure that we're revitalizing that organization as well, so that it continues its traditions, I guess. But because we don't have enough on hand, and we have as many as 2,000, if not more, certainly during the 100th running, we had 2,300. That's a lot of folks to have to command and control. So we make that force up with a combination of a bunch of different sourcing solutions. You've got our college program. That was a program that we introduced in a much bigger form this year that tried to capture the college folks that are interested in events, in event ops, in marketing, and sports marketing, things of that nature, to come get immersion into what it takes to put on the world's largest single-day sporting event. I mean, there's something to that, to be sure. So for them to experience that on the ground level, for them to be able to take that experience itself and translate that into good managers, into good leaders when they get to wherever they're going, I think that was a crucial experience that through this immersion we offered them. And we basically tripled the numbers that we had last year for college interns to help do that. And I think it was a phenomenal success, and they brought new life, new young faces to our force.
I wonder how many of them, after being there, say, next time I want to come, I want to sit in the grandstand and watch the race.
There was plenty. only because their eyes, became wide as far as the magnitude about it, what it takes to put on this show, the length of the hours. For many young people working 12 hours straight, exposed to the elements, and some physical stuff, directing traffic when you're off at 5th and Holman, that's a big deal. Very intense for some of them. But that being said, the majority loved it. The surveys, the feedback that we got, many of them are coming back, many of them are referring their friends. So it's a program that we're proud of to get that youth to be part of our workforce and to get them to come back year after year.
Something that I've heard a lot of squawking about is when I started here, when I first came here, tickets were $25 for good seats. Obviously, that was a long time ago. But when you bought a ticket, you could come and park in the infield if you were foolish enough. Now you buy a ticket to sit, but you also got to pay to park. Is that anything you had anything to do with, or did they just tell you this is what we're doing?
The parking plan, the monetization of that's been underway for some time. But when you think about, premium value, when you're trying to cram 300,000 people into this area, I mean, good grief, to be able to offer that ability to reserve, to purchase where you want to park. Otherwise, you're in the outskirts, you're in the hinterlands. I mean, it's certainly an incredible, endeavor to think that we can bring a city, the population of St. Louis, every person, to descend on this track, get them in and get them out in a few hours' time. That's something. So in order to cut through that, to get into the parking areas that are premium, well, there's obviously value to that.
How many glampers did they have this year? I noticed the tents were completely different than they were last year.
We had, I'm not sure how many total campers we had. It was full up, but it caused us a lot of grief because of the rain, the mud. Oh, good grief! I mean, we were, Mike Fox's team was out there laying plywood in the middle of the night trying to make walkways. The rain caused us grief throughout the entire month. I've got a new appreciation for the complexity of parking operations to try to, just cram all these cars into there when none of your terrain is usable anymore. So again, there's a tremendous number of tie-ins to what I was doing as far as restricted and unrestricted terrain.
Now, 24 years in the military, you stood a lot of inspections.
No, absolutely.
Do your people have to go through an inspection?
Baby steps. We got to ease into this military thing here. No, it's a great group of guys, and I think they're doing well. I think that I'm seeing improvements from just even last year on a number of metrics. I was talking with Doug about metrics with the 500 this year just yesterday, and our Net Promoter Score, which is a key grade card for the Speedway on all manner of metrics for customer service and performance, and how you delivered on various parts of the race, increased over last year. And I think that most people believe that you just weren't going to quite top the 100th running. You had beautiful weather, you had a phenomenal finish, it was the 100th, it was special. And when people take surveys after the fact, there's a certain lingering feeling of that everything is rosy, so you get very high marks, which we did. This year, we significantly, by a good margin, exceeded last year. So I think that's very telling about a lot of things, even considering that we had a bit of a challenged egress. That rain, while we got the race in, and we were very thankful for that, came at a very inopportune time. It complicated the egress for a lot of folks, even in the north, particularly. Again, there's so many factors that go into traffic, to egress, and to getting folks out of here. Something as simple as the fact that the rain came. Well, it took a helicopter that used to, was able to fly around and be able to identify where the wrecks are, and they'll allow police to communicate on how to provide relief. Because of the rain and the weather conditions, it had to be grounded. So now you lost your eye in the sky, which, from having predator footage and stuff like that is very critical. From something I'm used to, it's a big deficiency. So there was less responsiveness to resolve wrecks that took place well away from the track, but had a compounding effect even as far back as Lot 1B or the North 40. And it was, again, just physics. You couldn't get the throughput out for that reason.
I know I got stuck in the infield. I stayed for a couple things, and I got stuck there and sat for about an hour in the car thinking eventually it'll move, and it did. And once I got out, I was able to get to where I wanted to go, where usually I had to go downtown and come all the way around. It didn't happen this year, so I was pleased about that.
Well, were you trying to go north or go south onto 16th Street?
I didn't want to get on to 16th Street. I wanted to get up to 38 because that's where I live over by the Eagle Creek Airport.
16th Street was wide open.
Was it? Well, I should have gone there, I guess. Anyway, after 24 years at one job, although you did a lot of things in those 24 years, but was it a big change to become a civilian now and take a civilian job and so on?
Well, absolutely. I think it took a long time for it to kind of sink in because over that 24 years, I had a lot of variety of duties. I had special duties where, in many cases, I'm away from Marine Corps bases and the like. And I think for the first year or so, it felt like I was on special duty assignment, with a new unit, working with a lot of civilians, which I had many times in the past, but it didn't really feel like I was retired yet. It was September 11th of 16 that it really kind of sank in that no, I'm out and not really part of that world anymore. So that was a sobering time. But as far as the transition itself, I think it's as I've told others, it's just kind of a recalibration. You can't talk to my young staff the way I would a round table of ops chiefs from MARSOC. So you got to tailor the approach, certainly.
Yeah, well, I only spent 4 years a little over 4 years in Uncle Sam's Canoe Club. And just leaving that was a little bit of a difference because, like you say, you had people under you that you commanded. Well, and all of a sudden you're a civilian. You can't start doing some of the things that you were required to do in the military. So that's got to be a change.
I think that one thing that was beneficial to me is coming to the Speedway. IndyCar and the Speedway itself is. You've got a team of truly committed professionals. You've got a lot of passionate folks who are really want to belong to this. I mean, I was spoiled in the Corps, certainly spoiled of my last quarter of the career spent with Marine Special Operations Command, where the guys they go through hell to get to there. They're screened extensively to be able to do that work. I felt that same sense of passion with the Speedway, so that was a very familiar aspect to my environment. So guys who are mission focused, wanting to get the job done, I think is great.
And as a civilian and being here, you go home every night and you see your wife and your kids. I mean, there were times in your life you didn't see them for weeks on end.
So
or months maybe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 10 months, in some cases, a couple times. Month of May. Didn't see the kids of the family very much for that time. Just long hours as you would expect. But my wife was like, I was still going home though. But my wife was like, I kind of preferred it when you were deployed because I don't have to, I didn't have to cook for you or do all your laundry. So in any case, but
it's nice of her to take up that duty though. You said you were a motorsports enthusiast. How did you follow, being you were around the world for most of your career, I would assume, how did you follow motorsports and what intrigued you about wanting to get involved in it?
I think most of it was just having hot rods and motorcycles as a hobby. You're doing track days and that sort of thing. The funny thing is, now that I've come to the Speedway side, we've got these two hot rod Mustangs and had big plans to go out and do a lot of things on the weekend, and I've touched it once. I've thought and done things with those cars less now than I ever had before, to be honest. But I think it's all right. I'm certainly enjoying myself.
Whenever you talk about what has happened or is going on in the Speedway, everything goes back to the Christmas tour. And I was told that what they're looking at, and it may have come through you, I'm not sure, they're looking at put Santa Claus down where the kids can see him instead of up on Victory Lane, or Victory Circle, putting down where kids, and they were also, I heard talk about flooding an area where they could ice skate. Is that something, did I hear that correctly?
I'm not sure. I don't think that's been announced yet. And
but I mean, it's something that's
scares the hell out of me. I'm worried about throughput. I've got to get those cars through there. But trying to maximize the opportunities with that event, I think that everyone's taken a hard look at it about what makes sense, to be sure. Again, I think it was a great success last year, and we hope to replicate it again.
Well, I was also told that the company that provided that told the Speedway that for their first effort, they had beat and attendance, some of the facilities that have had it for a number of years, that their attendance here was better than theirs. And I've heard that they're looking to expand the displays.
Absolutely. And that was a key thing coming from the company itself, was saying that for your first year, keep your expectations in line, because, all tracks struggle for the first year, but it was the exact opposite. It was, I think, and by all estimates, a home run. And if they do expand some of the displays, make it even longer, a better experience, I think it'll even draw more folks.
Well, let's face it, 16th Street goes past Lafayette, so they can go past there and go all the way to downtown. We went through and were very impressed with it, and as everybody has been that went through there, which is probably about everyone. But again, that couldn't be any easier than the month of May, because you had to, I'm sure stuff failed or flopped or had problems. We were busy all day long, and then of course you're there until 9, 10 o'clock at night. I assume you were there. I saw you there when I went through.
Or 11, or
or
later.
12, yeah, but
Leaving to go home on race night around 11 to get a call at midnight from from Doug.
Oh, really?
On my way back at 2, but that's good stuff. That's the kind of stuff I think that you're excited for. Yeah, there's some long hours and stuff like that, but how disappointing would it be for me to be part of the mundane, the 9 to 5?
That wouldn't fit you at all.
So yes. So, get a little tired, but no, it was great to be part of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm impressed with what you've done. The first time I met you, who did I want to see? I think I wanted to meet Jay Fry. And I was told, you got to see Kirk Dooley. He's the chief of staff for IndyCar. And I was at Long Beach, if I'm not mistaken. And
that's where you and I talked first, yeah.
And I chased you around. Well, he's here, so I go there, and you weren't there. He's back over at the paddock, We just left, and you went that way. Well, finally I caught up with you, and accomplished what I wanted, and you've always been cooperative. Anything I've asked, you've answered. And when I invited you here, you said you'd be here, and here you are.
Well, I appreciate you having me on here.
Oh, it's great. I think the job you're doing and the organization of what's going on within the facility is vastly improved from what I've seen over the years, and I commend you for the job and what you're doing and how you're building it.
I mean, I appreciate that, but tons more opportunity. I mean, it's almost unlimited. There's so much we can do with the vastness of that place, with all the different events that we've got going on. I mean, we got the Brickyard coming up again, so this will be one full cycle. So I joined just before the Brickyard last year, and I know that was during some unprecedented heat that we had. Hopefully we can keep that at bay. But standing out there on pit lane when those high temperatures. I mean, I've been in Afghanistan when the ambient temp was well over 125, and I still felt it was pretty damn hot there on pit lane with those guys. And the safety patrolmen out there running that, standing out there 12 hours straight. Many of them, old timers, just committed to this place, committed to the track, and stand on their post. So my hat's off to all those guys.
Well, I appreciate you taking 24 years of your life to learn how to withstand heat.
I still hate it. Take the cold any day.
But at least when you left here after the heat, you could go home and take a shower. I have a feeling a lot of guys that I talked to at Afghanistan, shower, what was that? A good meal, what was that? So I appreciate you taking the time to come here, and I have a feeling that, that the Speedway is realizing, like you said, you got 900 acres, a lot of things we can do here in between. And since it's there, why not use it? And they are. I think it's great. Just more work for you, though.
It keeps us on the treadmill, to be sure.
Well, keep up the good work, and thanks for taking the time to come here, and I'm sure we'll see you speeding around the Speedway for the Brickyard again. And then, of course, you'll hear from me at Christmas time. See what's new and exciting with that.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thanks. The Director of Events for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, retired Major Kirk Dooley. Next week, as I said, my first scheduled guests are the owner of Harding Racing, Mike Harding, and the team manager who's been here before, and everybody probably knows, Mr. Larry Curry. Their first effort in a month and a half or 2 months preparation for the Indianapolis 500, I believe they finished 7th, and they're looking to run Pocono, and then their plan is, and they're working on a program to run full-time next year, so that's going to be good. Until next week, I want to thank everybody for watching, listening, for those of you here, Till next week, Don Kay saying good night. Thanks for being here. Talk to you next week.